He said after the Prophet left, and the Prophet ﷺ was not only teaching those things that are necessary to live a fully human life. So the Prophet ﷺ taught us how to pray, which is obviously devotion is our purpose, and so that's the most important thing. But he also taught the things about eating, about dress, modest dress, eating healthfully, minimalizing what we eat, not eating too much. He taught how to interact with people, akhlaq, all of those things. But he also was a ruler. And he differs from Isa, for instance, in that, because Isa alayhi salam never ruled. He was a prophet, but he never ruled. And that's why sometimes Christians will criticize the Prophet ﷺ for aspects of his life on earth. And those criticisms are largely due to the fact that he was a ruler. And so he made judgments that rulers make, and he made the best judgments because he was the best of rulers. But Jesus was never a ruler. So it's much easier to have an idealized view of Christ in their mind, because we don't know what he would have done had he been a ruler, had he had the power to act as a political leader as well as a prophet. But our Prophet ﷺ did. He had to deal with military situations. He had to deal with treason, which is a capital crime in the governments of the world. So the fact that he had people put to death for treasonous reasons, people can fault him. That doesn't sound like a prophet. No, that doesn't sound like your prophet, because your prophet was never in a position where he was forced to make a ruling like that. And so this is one of the aspects of our prophet that is very important to understand, that he wasn't just a religious leader. He was a military leader. He was a military commander. He was a political leader. He was a father. Jesus wasn't a father. Again, you can idealize people that don't have the problems that go with households. The transparency of our Prophet ﷺ is that his marital problems are in the Quran. And people say, well, why is that? Well, because that's part of life. And he came to teach us all aspects of life. And one of the aspects of life is sometimes you're going to have problems in the house. So how do you deal with it? Domestic violence? No. That wasn't his way. So those aspects. So what he says is that the Prophet ﷺ was a political leader, and then he trained these men who, when they took power, they were capable of not only ruling as politicians, but ruling as politicians following a prophetic methodology. And so Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, and these are the four that are agreed upon according to Al-Sunnah, that they were Mahdiyun. They were rightly guided. Khulafa Rashidun, Mahdiyun. And then most of the ulama add to that Umar ibn Abdul Aziz as a fifth exemplar. And then historically there have been others that come close to the prophetic model, but don't go under that alaykum bi sunnati wa sunnat al-khulafa ar-rashidin al-mahdiyyin min ba'di. They don't fall under that category that the Prophet ﷺ defined, that we should follow their sunnah as well. Because why? Because they're on the methodology of the prophets. So people like Amir Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi is an example of a prophetic leader. He was following the methodology of the Prophet ﷺ. Uthman Dan Fodio in Nigeria is another example of a prophetic Amir who's really attempting as a scholar and as a statesman to implement the methodology. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi is another example of that. He's an exemplar of prophetic practice. Unfortunately, we have far fewer than we would like. But our civilization, in terms of just pure human legacy, I think has far more examples of benevolent and enlightened leadership than other pre-modern civilizations. So that's also in our favor, but it doesn't mean that there weren't serious problems. So what he says is that they were able to judge as exemplars of the prophetic methodology. So they didn't need recourse to ulama. And so he said because of that reason, the ulama were not involved in politics. They were involved in ilm al-akhirah. That's what their concern was. It wasn't about the dunya. But as these leaders who had knowledge began to disappear, then they began to rely on fuqaha, because they were no longer faqih, because according to our tradition, the imam should be a mujtahid. So the political leadership should actually be a mujtahid. He should be able to decide what the hukm shar'i, the legal ruling is in any given situation. That changed, but during the time, for instance, of the tabi'een, they still had rulers. Even during the Umayyad period and the Abbasid period, the rulers generally were highly educated Muslim scholars as well. And many of them loved the company of grammarians, of literary scholars, poets, because they had great knowledge of language. Now, a lot of them can barely put two sentences together. In fact, some of them, if they just applied for a job as a doorman at a good hotel, they probably wouldn't get the job. It's amazing how they got into power, which shows you tu'ti mulkum man tasha, you know. You give dominion to whomever you please, including the gardener, you know, or the son of an Ethiopian shepherd. Huh? Amazing. You know, Obama in Ethiopia, because he's from Luo tribe, you know the Luo tribe, it's a tribe in Ethiopia. A Luo tribesman could not get elected president in Kenya because of his tribe. You can ask any person from Kenya, except maybe a Luo, but you ask everybody else, and they'll tell you that he couldn't get elected in Kenya just because of his tribe. But how do you get... You give it to whomever you please. If that's not a proof of that verse, I don't know what is. I mean, a man whose middle name is Hussein, and his last name rhymes with Usama. Amazing. So what he said